The next 3 guidelines for scheduling a meeting ask you to consider what you're trying to accomplish and who you've invited. Number 3, pick the best time of day for the results you need. Now, this guideline taps into research that's just come out in the past few decades and that I talked about in the lecture on designing with time. The research suggests that most people, not all people and not always, but often enough that it's worth heeding, do better analytical thinking in the morning, suffer a trough of fatigue and disillusionment in the middle of the day, and then they loosen up in the afternoon. So here's what that implies for meetings. Morning meetings. Mornings are for tactical work meetings. Mornings are great for your regular team cadence meetings and the project check-ins. These are also good times for planning meetings, problem-solving meetings, and analytical, logical decision-making meetings. Meetings that use a defined process to work through data and reach a logical result. Finally, mornings are great for big announcements. If you're the CEO sharing your quarterly results with analysts, you want to do this early. Salespeople giving a big hot demo? Again, early works better. Morning can also be a great time for all those all-hands meetings where leadership is sharing company news with everyone. These high-stakes broadcast and introduction meetings work well in the morning, not because you're wrestling data, but because that's when the presenter often displays the highest level of positive energy and confidence. The research has shown that stock analysts and potential clients alike are all swayed to think more highly of your presentation when it's delivered with an energetic, positive confidence, which is at its peak in the morning for most people. Midday. Well, midday isn't particularly great for any meetings. This is when energy and mood tend to dip. So that said, I do know that many companies will schedule their webinars or informational updates, like a lunch and learn at midday because they get better attendance. People who are otherwise too busy to attend a webinar will sign up if they know they can listen at their desk while they eat lunch. It's not an optimal time for energy or engagement, but, sometimes you gotta go with what you can get. Finally, afternoon. Now, the studies show that our energy begins to recover again in the afternoon, but not fully. In fact, towards the end of the workday, we're all a bit tired about thinking logically about all those details, which, happily makes the afternoon a great time for creativity, for exploration and possibility. We're better able to suspend judgment in the afternoon and just kind of go with interesting ideas. This makes afternoons a great time for these kinds of meetings. Ideation, action reviews for big projects, sense-making, exploratory meetings, community of practice and networking. One of the good reasons those are often evening meetings rather than early morning meetings. So if you're familiar with the 16 types of meetings, you'll notice that I left out governance meetings, workshops, and training. That's because many of these meetings are full-day events asking for both tactical, logical thinking, great energy, and creative thinking. So if you're scheduling one of those meetings, use these tips as you craft the order of events on your agenda. I also left out issue resolution, because the best strategy for those is highly dependent on the specifics of the issue at stake. Hopefully these tips have given you more ways to strategize when you're facing one of those. Okay, so the first question to answer when asking when I should schedule a meeting is literally what time of the day I should schedule that meeting for. The second one is how often do I need to meet? So tip 4. Find the best meeting frequency for your team. As I've mentioned, many teams hold a daily stand-up meeting first thing in the morning. First thing in the morning tells you what time of day, and daily is the frequency. or the cadence for that meeting. Now, there are a whole set of meetings that get repeated at regular intervals, these cadence meetings, and part of your scheduling art will include figuring out how far apart to make these meetings. I've done a lot of research on this one and have included some links in your workbook if you really want to dig into it. The short version of it is this. Shorter meetings held every day work really well for teams that move fast and deal with constantly changing information. Hospital workers are a great example here, as are, most growth-oriented leadership teams. Medium-length meetings, like 45 minutes to 90 minutes, held weekly, work well for most full-time working teams. Meeting every other week or, less often only works for keeping relationships intact and low-priority projects. It's just too far apart for any group actively collaborating on their work to keep in sync. Monthly or quarterly, that works well for strategic meetings, like the board meetings, and for your organization's strategy review meetings. Now, you don't want to go more than 90 days, though, because there seems to be some kind of cliff there where people really, lose touch with what you're trying to do. So anything spaced more than 90 days apart, that basically means that you're starting from scratch. Okay, like I said, feel free to dig deeper into the workbook. Okay, so those are the tips about the best times of day for different types of meetings. And that's all dandy if your meeting participants are in the same room or even the same time zone. Increasingly, however, that's just not the case. That's why you also need to pay attention to time zone. I wish there were some easy answers here. There aren't. If you're working globally, you need to expect to attend some meetings at 0 dark crazy early and some at, way past your bedtime. There aren't easy answers, but there are tools and strategies that make international meetings manageable. There are many tools for finding an appropriate time. I personally like Every Time Zone and timeanddate.com's World Clock Scheduler. So you'll find links for these and more in the workbook for this section. And if you're working with an international team that meets regularly, I also recommend establishing a schedule rotation. For example, you might have it so meetings in January are scheduled unpleasantly early for the people in the US. Then, in February, the schedule changes to be unfortunately late for the team in India. While there's no way to meet at a great time for everyone, at least this way you can share the burden fairly. Which brings me to our last tip. 6. Exercise cultural awareness. Finally, when you're scheduling your meetings, be aware that each culture has its own holidays and its own ideas about time. So some cultures find starting right on time super important. Some, not so much. Some countries essentially shut down during the summer. Work grinds to a halt over the end of the year holidays for others. So getting into all of the nuanced ways that expectations concerning time differ across cultures, that's beyond our scope here. Just know that if you're working regularly with people from other cultures, you should educate yourself about some of those differences. Okay, let's recap these last 2 sections. Here are the guidelines to follow for deciding when you should meet. First, minimize interruption. Or, in other words, protect the large blocks of time people need to get focused work done. 2, allow for transitions. Make sure everyone has at least 5 to 10 minutes between meetings, because everyone deserves to pee. 3, pick the best time for the results you need. Mornings for confident, high energy and analytical, tactical work. Midday for no stakes breaks. And afternoon for creativity and networking. 4, find the best meeting frequency for your team. Make sure you're meeting often enough to keep the group in sync. And 5, pay attention to time zones. Use tools to find the best possible meeting time, and if meeting regularly, take turns meeting at awkward times. And last, exercise cultural awareness. Be mindful when meeting with people from different cultures that their feelings probably aren't the same as yours, and do your homework.